Welcome back to MSR Colloquium, and we are on our session 4, which is on a panel discussion on AI and its impact on DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging. And the panel chair is Joan Marques, right? Marques, yeah. And then rest of the panel, you can see the names. I would let Payal and Tianyuan and Orneita, Goosby, and Kathryn. So the description is that DEI and AI have been identified as critical paths of awareness from here onward, but have thus far not been broadly discussed in correlation with one another. What could the effects of AI be on DEI as we have come to understand it? Would the understanding relationship between the two phenomena be constructive or destructive? What are some potential developments we're mindful of? After presenting some points to ponder, the panel will invite participants to engage in dialogue on attention points that may affect our collective future. Thank you very much. And let me hand over to Joan. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Anil, and thank you very much, everybody, for having us with this dialogue. If you allow me to share, which I'm doing now, and going into the presentation mode, and I believe this should be visible now. I don't have to read the abstract anymore because Anil did a wonderful job with that, but this is session 4, a panel discussion, as Anil mentioned, on AI and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a lot more things. These are our panelists. So before I start my introductory presentation, just again, an introduction or basically making you familiar with who will be speaking. Myself, Joan Marques, Woodbury University is the institution I'm representing. We will then have Dr. Payal Kumar from the Indian School of Hospitality, Dr. Tianyuan from Mount St. Vincent University in Nova Scotia, Dr. Orneita Burton from Abilene Christian University, Dr. J. Goosby Smith from Pepperdine, and Dr. Kathryn Goldman Schuyler from Alliant International University. So without further ado, I would like to start with my insights. And I have to say, it has been a mind-boggling journey looking into DEI and AI. And then, of course, bringing that within the scope that we're all interested in when we're talking MSR, management, spirituality, and religion. So as you can see, usually when we're showing DEI, we usually show different hands of different cultures and different ethnicities. And now we have a new friend, and that is our AI friend in the workplace, more and more. So I created a cloud to start with, to just bring home all the phenomena that I think are involved when we're talking with this merge of DEI and artificial intelligence. We just don't have algorithms and artificial intelligence at play and machines, but it is diversity we're talking about. It is awareness we're talking about, and empowerment and equity and spirituality and inclusion. And of course, also a piece of responsibility and consciousness and all the terms that we heard before and probably will hear hereafter in this particular colloquium. Now, here are some thoughts that came across as I was doing my research. Some critical considerations first. I think it's important for us to start realizing that the face of DEI will be changing more so than it has before, rather than just thinking about people from different ages and people from different cultures and people from different ethnicities. We now have to consider that the workplace, even more than before, will consist of human and non-human stakeholders, and that will have to find a place in how we define and perceive DEI from here onward. So that raises some questions such as, how will we have to redefine equity and inclusion when AI becomes a more steady colleague at work? What shifts will we face? And how will ethics and empathy evolve in our new workplaces? Points to ponder. By the way, what I will be asking for is that as we speak, to allow the presenters, the panelists to do their presentations, keep your notes. And then after the presentations are done, we will ask Kathryn to kind of give an overarching view. And then we will also invite, of course, the audience to share and to chime in and ask questions or bring up conversation points, points of concerns, or points of elation, if you will. Now, doing my research on this topic brought me to another piece of awareness that yes, diversity is growing, and in some areas very well. However, what we find is that diversity is oftentimes growing in the low-tech jobs, in the low-tech environments. So for instance, these days, what we're seeing is that the previous stereotypical truck driver, which was a white male, is now getting out of that industry, and we'll see more women. We see more minority members entering this field, but it is a low-tech environment. Nothing wrong with the low-tech environment, but what you get, and that is point 2 on this particular slide, we may perpetuate the dominance that we had before. Now, I have nothing against white males, so having written it there, I don't want to offend everybody, but I just want to bring back home the idea that with this digital evolution that we're going through, there are certain people in the world that have more access to these means, to programming these machines, if you will, these new constituents in our workplace, these new stakeholders that we're going to deal with. And are they the ones that are going to program them overarchingly, and will we with that perpetuate the status quo that we have been trying to get away from in the past couple of years? That is a piece of concern that we need to face and consider. So the next 3 slides that I would like to discuss are HAI, Human Artificial Intelligence Interaction. And when we're looking at that, let me first present you a fact. I'm totally in agreement with the fact that AI has proven its value to humans in multiple ways. We have self-directing vehicles, and I know a lot of people who are benefiting from that on their way to and from work. You know, it takes away a lot of the stress. We have customer service chatbots. A lot of company owners are gratefully using this opportunity because, yeah, it saves costs and it saves time to have these customer service chatbots. We have ChatGPT. We extensively spoke about that, or I heard the presenters extensively speak about that in the previous session, and we'll briefly touch on that too. Actually, some of the subsequent panelists will also talk about that in more detail. And what I think, and this is of course not all, but what I think is that healthcare is particularly benefiting from AI. I read about an example of brain cancer surgery where artificial intelligence can predict whether an area of brain tissue has cancer cells or not. And this helps surgeons in real time to decide what area should be removed with a precision of more than 90%. So with that, they learn what they should remove and what they should leave. And there are way less mistakes made that way. So there's a lot to thank artificial intelligence for. Another fact that we should highlight is that with artificial intelligence coming in big time in the workplace, we will see, especially probably starting in 2026, that in corporate boards of directors, we will have artificial intelligence components, machines that will help make decisions at the highest level of organizations, if not already doing so, but it will be really rampant, more abundant in 2026. Another fact is that AI is expected to create huge job loss among humans. We see that already, not to the extent that it's been feared. There have been predictions that it may even run up to 47% of our current jobs that will be taken away by AI. So the consideration that we should keep in mind here is that depending on how we human beings utilize and embed AI in work tasks, it can either replace or enhance human labor. There are a couple of questions also that came up in looking at this topic. How ethical or unethical is it to replace humans with robots? You can say, well, we do that all the time already, but in more detail, how will we adapt to the dehumanization of society, whereby we replace human-to-human relationships more intensely with human-to-robots relationships, and whose ethics and biases will be embedded in the used AI? That was a concern that I mentioned earlier, and it will come up again in the couple of next slides, because it is a legitimate concern. What you put in, that is what you will be getting out. Even though AI teaches itself, you know, it perpetuates based on the initial input that it got. I learned that human resource management richly uses AI for the right reasons, because AI can be useful, but it needs to be mindfully included. It can be very time and cost efficient in decision-making processes, but we need to also know that not all decisions can be made on rationale, on statistical data. How do you, for instance, define what a good employee is? Is that only based on a set of data, a set of statistics, as AI can decide? Or should we also look at the emotional aspects, and how will we cover that? So here's a little my red book that I'm opening on the idea that AI is unbiased. There was a statement made in an article that was talking about how we should be alert on this. And I'm going to read this literally. The application of AI in HRM is more than just the deployment of a technology. It's also necessary to consider how the technology responds to the needs and contexts of HRM. For example, there's a case of Amazon, which discovered that its hiring algorithm was based against female applicants because it had identified a causal relationship between sex and job performance based on the data that was used to train the AI. So even when the sex of the applicants was excluded from the algorithm, the AI excluded applicants based on other attributes that were associated with women candidates, such as, for instance, their educational background. So in sum, this was a technological success, but it was an HR failure. And those are the things that we need to be mindful of. I went to ChatGPT and asked, what are the advantages versus the disadvantages of AI in the workplace for diversity, in regards to diversity? And I found that the advantages are actually the mirror effect of the disadvantages. ChatGPT can help us to bias mitigation. It can help us with inclusive hiring. Again, everything if the input is correct. It can help us with language and accessibility support, especially if we're dealing with a very diverse group of people from different backgrounds and different countries. It can help personalize and, personalize employee support. It can help us with collaboration and knowledge sharing, decision support, enhanced productivity and efficiency. But on the other hand, if not done right, it can exacerbate biased amplification. It can amplify bias. It can exacerbate lack of diversity. It can cause limited representation in training data. It can cause ethical and privacy concerns. And basically the statement that was made by ChatGPT itself is, here at the bottom, to address these challenges, it's crucial to promote diversity and inclusion in AI development teams. Because it's great to have this technical team, but diversity and inclusion should be on the forefront of when we train people to input data in AI, because that will ensure the availability of diverse and representative training data so that we don't get a biased outcome. So my final statement here is AI should be guided by a desire to overcome the intellectual limitations of humans and not to replace human intelligence with machines. And that is my share. I would like to pass it on to my colleague Payal Kumar, who also has some very important things to say. And please keep your notes till we are done with the first round of information.
Thank you so much, Joan. I'm just putting up my deck. A very thought-provoking presentation. So I hope I'm audible and I hope my PPT is visible. If somebody can just shout out.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great, thank you. So it's a short presentation. It's more like an icebreaker to the topic. And I'm actually gonna pose possibly more questions than I'm going to answer, but I guess that's what we researchers do, isn't it? So diversity, equity, and inclusion, and these days the buzzword is all about psychological safety for the employee, no matter what your background is. So I'm asking, is AI an enabler or another barrier? And there's so many barriers, as we know. So first of all, I keep hearing people saying, oh my God, what's happening? And, AI and chatbots, and it's going to dumb down students, and it's going to dumb down faculty, and all this kind of existential crisis is going on. But don't forget that the industrial revolutions, which kept happening and are still happening, we're the ones who created it, isn't it? We are the ones who introduced steam power and assembly line production and automation and also AI. So something like fire was discovered, but the industrial revolutions are very much man-made. And earlier, the existence was about, I think, therefore I am. I wonder if that has to change now, Chat GPT, I provide you information and therefore I am. So that's just to start on a bit of a humorous note. I don't know if any of you have seen the Oppenheimer film. I've just seen it a couple of days back, so you'd know about it. Robert Oppenheimer, American physicist, known as the father of the atomic bomb. And after he witnessed what he'd actually created, which was destruction of hundreds and thousands of people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, he was deluged by extreme remorse, and he became an advocate for nuclear arms control. Now, the famous quote, which he quoted from the Bhagavad Gita, is what Krishna says in the Gita: now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. And this reflected the conflicting emotions he experienced, the joy of having created something much faster than any other physicist in the world. And there was a kind of arms race going on. But then when he realized the destruction it can cause, he was absolutely inundated. And so much so he found this quote to be of such relief. And I'll explain what it actually, I don't think the director explained it very well in the film. It was just a passing phrase. I'll explain it. And, he actually learned Sanskrit. He actually learned the full language in order to read the Bhagavad Gita in the original. So that's how important this quote was for him. So just a quick background, Arjun was about to have a battle. So Arjun is sitting down there in the battlefield, and he was about to have a battle with another family, which consisted largely of his cousins and even a lot of gurus. So just before the battle started, and he walked down the battlefield with his close ones on one side and the so-called enemy on the other side, and he got completely perturbed by this moral dilemma. And he says, I mean, how can I kill my cousins and how can I kill my gurus? It's just not possible. I can't do it. And so then Krishna, he starts explaining things to him. And that is what we call the Bhagavad Gita, which is known literally as the celestial song. So Krishna explains to him, he says these words: now I have become death, destroyer of worlds. I am time, the mighty destroyer, engaged in annihilating creatures. Even without your participation, all the warriors shall cease to exist. In other words, he says their death is written. You're an instrument in this, right? So although Arjun was torn between his duty as a warrior and empathy for loved ones, this brought him some amount of relief. And then Krishna also said that you have to do your duty, because if they retain power, they're really bad to the citizens and all this. So you're in a moral dilemma, but you have to go towards the good. And so, as I said, Oppenheimer felt a great sense of awe and humility after unleashing destructive forces, and he found a lot of solace in this quote from the Gita. So let's go back to AI. As I said, it's a man-made creation. It is drastically changing our lives, at times for the better, greater efficiency, greater speed. There's some YouTube video going around where this tractor kind of thing goes through fields and just simply destroys all weeds. It's got to that kind of extent. All industries, agriculture, medicine, you name it, are being affected. Education, the previous talk was on that only. So the question is, can it enhance greater participation and inclusion for employees with disabilities? Yes, it can. For example, AI-powered technologies can convert text to speech, or they can offer assistance for the visually impaired. So on the one hand, it's a mechanism for more diverse, employees to come into the workplace who may not have been able to earlier. But what is the shadow side? What is the other side that we need to talk about? I mean, as we know, the late Stephen King said that we had created our own destruction. I quote him, unless we learn how to prepare for and avoid the potential risks, AI could be the worst event in the history of our civilization. He also said it seems to be creating a power over us and it could surpass human intelligence. And you would have read about Facebook did one experiment, but they actually found that two robots were talking to each other in a different language that we humans couldn't understand. So they had to completely shut down that project. So maybe there's some truth in that. Maybe one day they'll have more power over us, something to think about. As Joan mentioned, they could amplify our biases and prejudices. I'll give some more examples in the next slide, and it can replace jobs. So here's an interesting example about replacing jobs. There's a startup in Bangalore, which let go of 90% of the customer care executives and replaced them with one chatbot named Lena. Costs reduced by 85%, time to response went from 1 minute and 44 minutes to an instant. Resolution time went down from 2 hours, 13 minutes to 3 minutes and 12 seconds. So a lot of extreme efficiency going on there. And obviously the chatbot is not going to take a CL or a toilet break or whatever. The owner, Mr. Shah, said the ideal customer support profile for us at least would have been somebody who has the understanding of e-commerce, technology, product, and communication. That is something we can't find in the market. So he's saying that, for me, replacing 90% of the staff was just a matter of great efficiency and obviously saving costs. Now, when I asked ChatGPT, can we trust you? These are the answers that came up. Spoke of knowledge limitations. It's up to September 2021, as we know. Misinterpretation. I mean, at times I found some wrong answers. Maybe I found 90-95% accurate, but some things are wrong. And it actually says bias. Although efforts have been made to minimize bias in my data training, I might still inadvertently display some biases present in the text I have been trained on. So this is what Joan mentioned. It's a reflection of the past data. It's gathering the past data, putting it together. And therefore, it's very likely that it's going to carry on the biases that a lot of we as humans have. Again, just to give some examples, in the job recruitment system, if historical data shows a higher number of male applicants being screened and selected, then the AI system could be biased towards that. Racial bias, facial recognition systems have been found to have higher error ratings when identifying people with darker skin tones. Age bias in healthcare, older patients may receive less aggressive treatment options compared to younger patients. If again, the earlier data suggests that one should go with younger patients. Socioeconomic bias, a loan approval system may be trained on bias data that reflects historical discriminatory lending practices. So, communities which have been oppressed in the past, and not just in the past, continue to be oppressed, it may just carry on that way. And can't blame AI, right? Because it's reflecting tons and tons of data that we have produced. As I said from the beginning, that it is our creation. So obviously addressing these biases requires careful data collection, diverse training, rigorous testing, and ongoing monitoring to ensure that the applications are fair and ethical. So that's it from me. I will actually be switching off, Joan, because it's 1 a.m. here. So I don't know if you have time for a couple of questions or so, or do you want to, take them at the very end, or
maybe we can take if you're signing off, because we don't want to make sure that the dialogue takes over all the time. But maybe if there's one or two questions now, then we can let you go, Payal, because we respect time.
Yeah, that's kind of you. So if anybody has a question or two, I'm happy to take it. Anybody seen Oppenheimer?
Yes, I did see Oppenheimer, and he did use that quote. So that was wonderful to connect that very much into it. Thank you.
He used it, but he didn't explain it. I don't think it was explained to the audience. And so if it's a Western audience, I don't think they would have actually got a deeper meaning behind that. With Krishna saying to Arjun, their death is already written. Don't worry about going into the battlefield. And anyway, you have to side for the good. And don't forget the Bhagavad Gita, Anil. I mean, I'm sure it's a symbolic. It's about the fight between the good and evil within us, isn't it? It's not just about a physical battle at the Kurukshetra.
And it's also about sort of that we are the higher consciousness within which good, bad, this, that, all opposites coexist,
Exactly.
complementary.
Exactly.
We are neither not bad. These are all like social labels. So we
Well,
are
exactly. And then similarly, one could say, you can't blame AI because we created AI. It's like money, right? It's a piece of paper. You can use it for good or evil, isn't it? It's how we as humans, use it in the end or abuse it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there
This
seems to
also
be
will-
there's a lot of talk about AI is going to destroy us, and this as if it's a sentient being. I know one of the presenters is later on going to talk about emotions and sentient being. But the point is, it's not, right? It's not a sentient being as yet. Yeah, Anil, you were saying.
No, I was just going to relate back to Joan's opening comment, which is that when he said the extra arm, so I said even the transcendentalist, transcendence doesn't have a body, doesn't even have arm, but it's all over the place. What do you do
You're
with
right.
transcendence in the office? Anyway, we'll have that fun discussion towards the end.
Omnipresent. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
thank you, Payal. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank
So
you.
just a quick note, Payal, although you physically
Hi,
will be
Kathryn.
gone, the points that I've taken from you will remain and be there at the closing.
I
Exactly.
truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
So maybe now invite Tian to do her presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, oops. Yeah. I suppose everyone can see it. Okay, so
Yes, we see it and hear you.
yeah, thanks, Kathryn. My name is Tianyuan. I'm very honored to be part of this wonderful panel. I'm going to talk about AI and emotions in terms of its implications for spiritual research paradigm and spiritual approach to teaching diversity management courses. I want to relate it to my personal experience because I identify as a member of minority groups in the Western academia. So, first, let's clarify this question. Does AI have emotions? The simple answer is no, as of yet. If you ask AI, ChatGPT, this question, the answer will be AI does not have emotions in the same way humans do. So far, emotions have remained exclusive to living beings with consciousness and self-awareness. However, there's this concept of emotional AI, which is an ongoing research area where the development team endeavors to develop a type of AI that can recognize, respond to, and simulate emotions. Actually, this type of AI is already available to a certain extent. They are successful because AI can already recognize, respond to, and simulate emotions. But we need to differentiate between genuine emotions and faked emotions because AI lacks consciousness, self-awareness, and subjective experiences, which are the prerequisite for genuine emotions. So the AI emotions are faked emotions. With that kept in mind, I'd like to talk about why emotions matter for research. I have been trying to develop a spiritual research paradigm informed by Zen Buddhism that is alternative to the mainstream positivist approach to research. I want to bust the positivist myth of an objective, emotionally detached, and value-neutral researcher. Such a researcher does not exist. With the positivist emphasis on rationality and emotional neutrality, the rich nonverbal experiences of the five senses, our five senses, our hearing, smelling, seeing, etc., and any intense or subtle emotions accompanying these experiences are filtered, neglected, and oppressed. Therefore, positivist methods do not offer the researcher the opportunity to fully experience the reality and to deconstruct the ego and to explore higher levels of consciousness. So it is my understanding that true wisdom only comes from personal, subjective experiences. And in the spiritual research paradigm that I'm trying to develop, I want to emphasize a holistic, embodied ways of knowing, including our five senses, our emotions, and the higher level of consciousness, including ego transcendence and non-dual awareness. And this is also in line with the trauma-informed research, such as Zen-informed approach, that has been developed by historically marginalized groups, and also for these groups. Because we are talking about diversity, I want to emphasize that trauma or emotions, especially destructive emotions, are so important for these underrepresented groups. It is my personal experience that awakenings are often driven by our sufferings, accompanied by intense emotions. And our emotional conundrums are the Dharma gates in Zen Buddhist terms. They are the Dharma gates to our healing and empowerment. I want to cite a Buddhist quote: "Your angst is your liberation." Our deepest angst and emotional wounds are the keys to ego transcendence and reaching higher levels of consciousness, because it is our attachment to the ego that produces emotions and the sufferings. Like the Buddhist verse of atonement says, all our past and harmful karma or sufferings are born from our beginningless greed, hate, and delusion through body, speech, and mind. So that being said, let's go back to the question, what is the implications of AI for research, especially for spiritual research paradigms that I'm talking about? Can AI help with developing spiritual research methodology or be applied in our spiritual research? Well, so far, I haven't been able to find much relevance with AI in terms of its application in my own research. On the contrary, I am concerned that AI is risking perpetuating the dominant positivist paradigm because of its emphasis on rationality, objectivity, algorithms, and dualistic thinking. But a good thing that I have found about AI is that AI, such as ChatGPT, can offer sex therapeutic conversations, which has the potential to nurture our self-awareness and help healing for researchers, for educators, and for students. And these researchers, educators, and students may in turn use AI as a tool to inspire their research or teaching due to this healing process. Of course, there are moral concerns because we know AI could offer misleading advice, such as AI hallucination. This is a term I just learned today. So there are moral concerns with this, but at least it has a huge potential in therapeutic healing for people with mental health problems or to reduce stress. I believe this has already been implemented in some places like India. And at last, I want to talk about how I try to use AI in my teaching. I am trying to apply a spiritual approach to my teaching, to my courses. I'm teaching a course called Managing Diversity, Gender and Other Issues. In this course, we talk about all kinds of discriminations based on gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, disability, etc. So in this course, I make it clear that we value personal experiences. We encourage students to express their emotions in order to foster the interconnection within the class. And this is also in line with the trauma-informed healing and empowering pedagogy. So there has been a concern inside me with potential plagiarism, however. For example, I have some writing assignments for this course, such as reflect on a situation where you are a minority of the group in terms of gender, race, etc. So based on that scenario, answer do some reflections on several aspects, and I found that AI or ChatGPT can actually fake a personal emotional story in response to such a question. So before I learn about ChatGPT, I would have given such a writing a decent mark. But because I know ChatGPT can do that now, so I'm very much concerned about how to prevent plagiarism in such assignments. But one thing I have discovered in the writing by ChatGPT for such assignments is that such faked personal emotional stories are always lacking details and are lacking texture of emotions in their narratives. So they are very general instead of very detailed or complex. So I can still differentiate largely whether it's AI written or written by real human. So my last question for the audience is, what if AI one day really develop into having emotions? What will be the implications for the spiritual research and teaching that I'm talking about? It must have both challenges and opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tian. I know that Kathryn will bring a holistic view at the end. So I'm asking again the audience to keep this question in mind. And may I now invite Orneita to share her insights and her points to ponder.
Joan, I think we wanted to hear from Jay first. Is it okay for Jay to go?
Jay, would you like to go first?
Sure, I think that was the order. Yeah.
Was the order? I'm sorry. Okay, please go ahead.
Sure. What is for a process check? What is our stop time?
About 10 minutes. Our stop time for the whole thing is
Right.
well, it depends on what time zone you're at. It's 12:44 in California. Where
How many minutes from now do we have?
We have about 45 minutes to go in this whole.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, great. Then I will share my screen and I will proceed here. So let me get my screen in slide share mode. And I will go over here. So hopefully, are you able to see my presentation? Or are you seeing the screen share mode?
We see the screen share mode.
Okay, it always does this. Let me go to the other one. have 3 screens I'm managing here. How about now? Do you see the big one now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll get my little timer going here. So my name is Goosby Smith. They listed me as professor. I am not. I serve as vice president for community belonging and chief diversity officer at Pepperdine. So I took a walk to the dark side of administration. And so I'll be looking at this topic through that lens. And so my topic today is races and faces. And one of the things I wanted to take a peek at is the fact that when we look at the humanoid robots that we have, these are some of the top ones, but these are also some other ones that have been created. You sort of notice that there is a pattern to them. In their research, Cave and Payal in 2020 called this the whiteness of AI. What they noticed was that the surface covering of many of the humanoid robots is of a white or fairer material. And so in their research, they raised some possible answers as to why that was the case. You know, could it just be a factor of the creation, the creators themselves making them in their own images? Because as I go back to these slides, you had this creator who made this robot, and then you had these robots that were in other countries. So they said, well, maybe it's just a byproduct of the creators, the developers, or they said maybe it's just looking at worldwide notions that are Eurocentric and depicting intelligence as having more Eurocentric features, or maybe more sardonically, they hypothesize it may reflect some hope that people who do not have Eurocentric features will become unnecessary as servants. And so this is their research, not necessarily my opinions, but it's very, very interesting either way. And so regardless of what the purposes are of that, there is a problem. So as we look at artificial intelligence, what we do see is that repeatedly, regardless of the company, regardless of the algorithms, many of them struggle to recognize faces of people with darker skin of African heritage equally accurately. In looking at gender recognition software or looking at facial recognition software, so I'm putting some accuracy rates up here for 2 types of software when just looking at facial matching. The lowest false match rate in general is for white males, and the highest false match rate is for Black females. So the false match rate means saying basically that you match the description of X. And so it's most accurate with matching the faces of white men, least accurate with matching the faces of Black women. When looking at another program that was doing gender matching, and it was trying to determine the gender of people, or sex per se, to be more accurate, the error rate was less than 1% when it was determining the gender of white male pictures. And the gender rate was up to 35% error when determining the gender of Black females. Specifically, this particular software could not determine it. It was incorrect on determining the gender of Oprah Winfrey, of Michelle Obama, and for Serena Williams. Part of the problem sometimes is a bias in the sample. This, I encourage you to look at this article. It's very interesting. It's from Business Insider. They did an average face. So they took all the pictures and munched them together of 400 CEOs in different industries. This happened to be the average face of 400 CEOs. And so as you look through the different industries, some of the features would change a little bit, but the color of the CEOs did not change. And so if you had a data sample that was looking at CEOs, that was using the pictures of CEOs, you would have a lot of faces that looked a particular way. And when we were listening to an earlier presentation, the way artificial intelligence works is that it trains itself to define something by each time it sees something. It looks at the features of that, and then it determines that, okay, that's what this thing is. So if it's only looking at a high number of faces that have particular features or have particular hues, then it's not going to determine something to be that. Some of the biases that the research has found are biases that have to do with the AI pipeline itself. So even how things become to be data. So issues that have to do with even creating the data in the first place. For example, what pictures are you even putting into the pile for the AI system to begin to even learn about, to even be able to define what the categories are? Also, some of the other biases are sampling biases, where they're just the sample of things in there just aren't representative of the real world. There was one problem with one facial recognition or artificial intelligence software where they put in a picture of, they said, show a picture of a loser, and it defined that it showed a picture of children in sunglasses. So if it's a child in a sunglasses, it listed that as a loser and a person likely to underachieve for whatever reason. So there was some type of confusing or confounding type of data in there. Also, there have been biases in terms of the techniques and ways that things are measured. So sometimes it's the way things are photographed. There may be, you know, a different scale or a different angle of the way that things are photographed. Also, other times errors, I'm just going through them very briefly. Some of the errors also had to do with subjective type of labeling. So when you have sort of like coding. So when you have people who are humanly just kind of coding different pictures, the biases that the people have that may be doing the coding to even putting the label in there that the computer's looking at, the bias of the person tends to go through. And then there were also biases that had to do with confounding biases that might be relationships between features or common causes that affected both things. For example, when they looked at different loan things for age, for example, and loan acceptance at this one bank, what they found was that they were showing that people weren't getting disapproved, and they kind of, the AI started to learn that people of a certain age weren't going to get approved, but that was just kind of a confounding factor. It was just coincidental in the data, but the AI was learning from the data that had some biases within it. And so as far as solutions, some of the solutions are looking at diversifying the programmers themselves, because since we tend to look at things and make things in our own images, that could have some diversification. Another value for diversifying the programmers and developers themselves is because they will tend to see some of these things that are happening, which I'll get to talking about one developer in particular in a second. Also, it's important to incorporate domain-specific knowledge. So to have developers that aren't just doing programs randomly, but that they have some specific knowledge about the issue. So if they're doing AI with respect to real estate, they know about redlining, they know about, you know, subprime loans, they know about some of the things that exist so that they can understand that, making sure the data sets are more representative, and also explicitly educating developers and the consumers of AI on the biases that do exist. One such developer is Dr. Borla Winnie, who is educated at MIT, Oxford, and also Georgia Tech. She has a wonderful TED Talk that I would encourage you to watch. She was doing facial recognition work at MIT, and she shows a video of the facial recognition program recognizing her colleague, but not recognizing her face until she put a white mask onto her face. Then it recognized her face as a face. So it wasn't even registering her face as a face, because the way that program had been defined to recognize what a face was using all these different biometric parts. And she defined two terms, the coded gaze, which is the bias in AI that we were talking about that resulted in these practices, and also the exclusion overhead, which was very interesting to me, which was how much a person has to contort themselves to be able to function within the technological system. So a few ending questions. Whose problem is this? Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother or sister's imager? And are we willing to confront the biases that really exist and look at how that impacts AI? And finally, what are the consequences of this misidentification for different industries? Because for policing, this has life or death consequences, and for medicine as well. And how high of a false positive for this incorrect identification are we willing to tolerate? So thank you very much.
Very, very eye-opening and very mind-boggling. Thank you very much, Jay. That was a great presentation. I bet we'll get a lot of questions afterward. Orneita, please.
Sure, let me share my screen. It doesn't seem as though I can, Anil. I don't have the authorization.
I thought I had made you also. Okay. Oh, I forgot. Oh, no, you're listed a co-host. I made you co-host. Let me remove and then add you again, okay?
Sure.
Make co-host. Do you see a sign? Do you see any sign that says you've been made co-host? No?
I see that she's made co-host. Yes, Orneita. So do you not have the little share screen at the bottom of your screen?
I do, but it does not share.
It doesn't allow that still?
No, it still does not.
If you want, I can open it for you. I do have your presentation, but try it one more time.
Okay, let me try it again. No, it does not so far. Hold on just a second.
So weird.
No, it does not give me the option to do so.
Okay, is it okay with you if I share it then, and then we just go the old-fashioned next slide route? Orneita?
I guess so. There's there's not another option there. Okay. Let's see. Okay, goodness. Yeah, my slides are different. Hold on a second.
Is this it?
That's okay. I'll go with what you have and try to talk through that. Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can do so, because you don't have the latest version of my slides, but that's okay. That's okay. Okay. Let me see here. Can you see my screen or Joan's screen?
Yeah, the screen that I have up, I think, is visible. Do you want me to put it down again, or can we continue?
No, we can continue. Okay, good. I appreciate everyone being here. My talk is a bit different. Let me go ahead and set my timer right quick. My talk is a bit different because overall, I am really sharing more of an informed use case. And it has to do with what has driven a lot of what we see around AI today. And so basically is that this is kind of a discussion in terms of why we are where we are, that was informed by research that I did with my doctoral dissertation around terrorism, and specifically bioterrorism. And so, Joan, if you could advance the slides. Okay, if you could think back 9/11, that was 2001. Where were you? And think about where were you, and at the time of when the first plane hit the first tower, what were you doing? Consider also how you were impacted. Okay. I was in Phoenix. I did my dissertation at Arizona State University. And at that time, there was a lot of activity around automation. If you remember Payal's slide, that automation has been around a long time, but not the idea of digitization. And so we had a center in information systems research that focused on digitization. And so I had to come up with a dissertation topic. And when I looked up at the sky and I did not see a plane in the sky, which was very unusual if you've been at Phoenix Airport, then I said, I know what I want to do my dissertation on. If you could advance that slide, please. Okay. And so when the planes hit the towers and all of that occurred at that time, there were many prayers. And so I just pulled one prayer of hope and healing. And with the idea of that was just a phenomenal experience that changed the lives of all of us. And so it was one of those calls, answer to a call, the idea of why am I here? What's my purpose? If you would go ahead and advance that slide, please. Okay. And so with that, I started working with the first responders and the state of Arizona. The governor of Arizona at that time was Janet Napolitano, and she actually had facilitated a lot of work in the Oklahoma City bombings. And so the interest is that there were some challenges around why there was not this sense of understanding and recognizing what enabled 9/11. And so the shortcomings were basically in interviewing the FBI, they said that there was too much information. You know, there was no ability to really assess whether or not there were credible threats around what they saw because of information overload, and also the inability to be able to detect anomalies, mainly because is that the data sources were not connected, were not shared, they were not related. Okay, and so the ability to detect an anomaly just did not exist. And so therefore, lack of integration of data and lack of integration of technologies was the problem. If you could advance, please. And so basically, a portfolio of projects were designed in order to create a surveillance environment where there was that sense of being able to monitor the entire global landscape to see whether or not something was actually going on. And then there was a group on detection, being able to detect if by chance a certain activity was in the play, and then how do we respond to that? Okay. If you could advance that, please. And so these teams, okay, were basically project teams. And with the idea of addressing all of those shortcomings in regards to 9/11. And so the intent was to be able to virtualize everything, digitize everything, and then be able to integrate and automate so that in terms of terrorist activity, and specifically in this case was bioterrorism, because the discussion is that the next terrorist activity would and could possibly be the idea of a biological agent. Okay, next slide, please. And so it was funded. It was teamed and funded. And so it was a activity, a collaboration between the state of Arizona, Arizona State University and the Research Triangle, who funded this activity. Next slide, please. Okay, so the intent, what needed to happen, basically, digitize everything was the guidance. Digitize everything. We needed real-time surveillance and detection. The increased use of high-performance computing, data management, improved data management, and then also the use of AI. And the intent was the ability to detect a weaponized flu virus. Everyone knows what a regular endemic flu virus is, but the idea of one being weaponized was a challenge at the time. And then the idea of simulating the testing of, in other words, in order to be able to identify a weaponized virus, it had to be tested first and then develop a response plan. Can you advance, please? So again, digitize everything. That was the guidance. And the idea was that your business should be converted into software. Okay, and so thinking about what does that look like? What does that mean? Is that rather than having a physical entities, artifacts, I guess, in that sense, is that everything should be coded and be able to code it, to be coded. And so when you think about it, it's like the language was not our language, okay, but it's now a language of computers. Computers talking to computers rather than people. Okay, advance that, please. And so, and again, a digitization, if you would go quickly through that, please. Next slide, okay. The idea was, and if you could back up. Okay, the term, as you probably have heard it, is that make everyone a participant in the effort. And so the idea of digitization and democratization of everything, data and technology. And so you hear a lot about citizen developers, okay? And so data scientist platforms that anyone can use, AI platforms that anyone can use. Okay, so that idea of where let's reduce the coding to the point of where we have a platform of development for technologies and data and everything. Next slide, please. Part of that was the need for and the development of robotic process automation. And so it's not only automation, which has been around a long time, but the idea of digitization so that robots can be used instead of people. Advance the slide, please. Okay, and so you might have been familiar with RPA. We use them in our classes. I teach technology classes, and so having a platform for automation, a platform for data management and data integration, for data science and analytics, and a platform for the development of artificial intelligence. And so overall, all of these technologies came out of, from this particular use case, the need in order to address terrorism. Next slide, please. Okay, specialized expertise that was needed. And so needed people who could do high performance computing, geospatial data science, operations research, natural language processing, machine language and AI, and in this particular case, epidemiology and the understanding of natural hazards. And so specialized expertise needed to be developed. Next slide, please. Now let me back up and let's talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Okay, and you think about it, and that's what I thought about. How does that relate to AI? Now, in my other slide set, which I can't share with you, if you saw the news, and you might not have seen the news because it wasn't newsworthy per se, although it should be, is that recently 5 states, at least 5 states, and Texas is included in one of those 5, they basically outlawed DEI. I don't know if you saw that, but they said as of September 1st of this year, then basically all the funding that had been given in those states for DEI was being pooled. Also, it made it such that as of January 1st, if anyone is teaching a subject or a topic, any professor associated with DEI, basically they're given one warning. And then the next time they start talking about DEI, then they would lose their job. Okay, so if you haven't seen that, look it up, because it's that sense of who are we concerned about, AI or people? Our people. Need to consider is that a lot of misunderstanding in terms of DEI is not taking things away from people. In those articles, it said the concern was that too much was being taken away from white people. That was what was written, okay? But when you look at DEI and belonging, especially that sense of everyone should be part of an effort, any effort in order to improve society. The idea of ending bias, okay, that should be a given. It should be a spiritual initiative to recognize the God-given purpose of every individual. Affirmative action, how is it that affirmative action gives to some people? I had a student when I first came here said that affirmative action was taking what belonged to them, a white group, and giving it to another group. And they truly believe that, and generations of that, okay? So the idea of where there is this misdistribution or this redistribution, I don't know how that came about, but the sense of where all it is let us all work together for the good of everyone. That should be DEI. Next slide, please. And quickly, and I'm bringing this to a close. The future is unlimited, but basically we're going in the direction that was always intended for technology. Putting all of this together is just part of the technology landscape. DEI should be just human. It's not something else that's associated with. It's the idea that all of us should be able to work together for the good of people. Next slide, please. And so basically, the preparation outcomes, we basically achieved all of them. We also, unfortunately, created our own terrorists. If you would advance the slide, and I'm going to bring this to a close. This is a background of one of the researchers that was working on the project. And if you could read it, you would see some interesting aspects of it. And this was one of the detection researchers, with the idea that we needed high-level computing. We needed people who were trained in natural languages. We needed people who had research interests and expertise in geocomputation. And so basically they found these people, and they did find them in Wuhan, okay? Now, these researchers had to modify their backgrounds on the internet because of fear of witch hunts. But overall is that there were researchers that were developing viruses at the time. Next slide. But there was also in the mix God, okay? And I'm definitely, a believer, I'm a Christian, but it's not just in word, it is in living. And here's another example of someone who lived their purpose. If you don't know about Rick Riscola, okay, he was the main security chief for Morgan Stanley in 9/11. And he had a plan. He had set up a plan because he truly believed that the next attack was going to be a plane attack on the Twin Towers. How he came about that, we don't know. But he had a plan in place that if and when that happened, that he had an escape plan. And basically, he put his escape plan in place when the first plane hit the first tower, and he saved 2,700 employees of Morgan Stanley. When he and 5 others went back up in order to make sure everyone was clear, the second plane hit the tower and he died along with 5 others. Some people have a vision. Some people are given, as we heard in earlier presentation, they just know. All of us have a purpose, and we don't want to miss that. If we don't include everyone and let God work as he has planned, then these type of amazing efforts will never occur. Thank you.
May I now thank you so much for this eye-opening release, Orneita. May I invite Kathryn to share with us her impressions?
So let me jump right in because I know how tight we are for time. And I want to start with, I want to thank everyone and say how honored I am to be part of this group, an amazing group of women. And I'm also aware that I'm the only person who would be regarded by many people as white. So it's an interesting thing because how we think of ourselves and how we experience ourselves, I could be seen as a privileged older white woman, not quite how I like having a feeling of identity. And most of my life I've felt, if we're looking at DEIB, at inclusion and belonging, I have felt unincluded and like I didn't belong wherever I was. And I think that's what drew me to MSR. That's what led me to search for spiritual connections, because I also didn't feel like I really belonged that much in my Jewish heritage where I grew up. So I suspect, I mention this because I'm guessing I'm not the only one here in the room who may have had some feelings, and that the whole notion of inclusion and belonging is a deep topic that we can't discuss without talking about emotions, as Tian has been mentioning. So a quick story is that I really wanted to engage with AI because I've been encouraged so much to by Anil. I had some concerns, but I really wanted to. So I noticed that a friend of mine was asking a question that on Facebook, very ordinary activity, that she wanted some help with. And let me just share this screen very quickly because here's the question. It required research. She wanted to know, what is the effect of intentional visualization on the default mode network? Now that's pretty abstruse to most of us. So I decided I would look it up with AI because I'd figured out how to do that, Anil. And here's something, and I was able to give her 2 very specific references from neuroscience journals, and it seemed quite wonderful. There they are down there, the default mode network and its functional connectivity, and intentional visualization reduces default mode network activity. So I told her, be a little careful because sometimes AI isn't accurate. Not only wasn't it accurate, those 2 articles don't exist. And she looked it up because I said be careful, so she didn't just go charging forward. Here is the first one that was cited in Neuroscience Bulletin. There is a volume 32, issue 1. It is in 2016. And the articles that are on the article that's on the first pages, which were cited, there were page numbers, is a different article. That other one, it doesn't exist anywhere. Same for the second one. So when we say that AI hallucinates, we have to be really careful about using it in research. And I'm sure that most people are not. I'll bet you that those of us here are, but out in the world, I really, really wonder. And I got a personal note from her saying, I removed your post because I found out those articles, they just don't exist at all. So my main points that I've taken away, not just from this, but from the earlier sessions I was at, are about bias, which was discussed so well here and was also brought up earlier by John Lass. but its influence in diversity, equity, and belonging is really a major thing. I don't have to go through it. You heard the excellent presentations. Then another point is that large language models, ChatGPT is a large language model. And I want to quickly put in here a couple of excellent things that I can put in the chat for you that are articles with links that you can look up that I found in preparing for this. So large language models can't think about phenomena. They don't reason. They can help a whole lot with logistics, with data management, but how can they reliably and safely support decision-making, particularly in relation to inclusion of different peoples, if we have them programmed by people with bias and who don't see the difference among different Black women's faces or know that they're faces? Oh my God, not even knowing that they're faces. Jay, how wrenching. So I want to close with bringing in something from my spiritual tradition. And I have come to be Buddhist in my practice in both the Tibetan and Zen traditions. And in that tradition, we look at what's at the core of beings, human beings, other beings as well, as being basic goodness. It's also referred to sometimes as the nature of mind. And in one wonderful practice that I do, there's this short phrase, all that we experience is inherently pure, empty, yet luminous, utterly beyond words. Utterly beyond words. The nature of mind is great bliss, naturally free. But that's beyond words. So the nature of AI, as in the form of an LLM, is words. It's all words. And it's words that are programmed by specific groups of people that have particular roles in power structures, in organizations, and particular ethnic backgrounds. And so we have to really be quite savvy, as I'm sure that we will be here in MSR, at least I hope so, but certainly not everyone who is using it is. And so there's, I think, various dangers out there in the world ahead of us, as well as increased capability to do a whole lot of tasks. And I'm not going to go through all the details. I've got a whole page full of wonderful notes here, but I think we need to leave time for other people.
Thank you, Kathryn. Judy asked, and I agree with her question, if you could please share that quote that, from your practice that used the word luminous, because that was definitely a beautiful one. Please.
Thank you, I will. And just so you know, it's normally not something that we share, but I will share just that portion of it. It's a particular practice that was actually written by my teacher, whose name is Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche, who is quite a being. So yes, I'll put just that portion into the chat.
Thank you very much. Now, I hope that our audience is willing to share some impressions, some thoughts. You don't have to just share questions. You may, of course, share questions, but if you have thoughts, that are either along the lines of what we discussed or opposing what we discussed, this is an opportunity to have a conversation. I see that Radha has her hand up. Please go ahead, Radha.
Thank you. Thanks, Joan, for your introductory remarks. This has been a very engaging and a very stimulating session. I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their work and thoughts. As a user of AI in my day-to-day work and using variety of AI tools, I have both the perspectives, negative as well as positive. I thought since you've asked to share our reflections, I thought I would share with the group. I agree that there are inaccuracies in using AI. There are also problems relating to citations and acknowledging the contributions of different researchers. But I believe that AI is still in the process of evolving, and it needs regulation to start with, and it needs proper guideline so that some of these inaccuracies or inadequacies that exist need to be put in place. Now, as the user of this technology, I find that there are a lot of benefits, with regard to the courses that I offer. For example, I offer courses in the field of OB and HR. It helps in the sentiment analysis of the employees in the organization, which you find it difficult to get through surveys because, surveys people are little concerned about if HR department comes to know what would happen. We use blockchain in our examination system, and also in the organizations that disguises the identity of the individuals, and thereby, people can be free in giving whatever they are giving, and they won't be overseen or watched by people who may be having some bias against them. AI helps in, of course, shortlisting resumes, expedites the process, increases efficiency, and with regard to diversity, in fact, we use augmented reality, as was shared by one of the speakers here earlier. So it helps us bridge the gap, bridge the distances, the geographical differences, and the person is immersed in the environment. So the immersive technologies can be a good way of, overcoming this diversity and probably bridging the gap which may be there. So similarly, RPA, for example, RPA is used in manufacturing organizations in a big way. And that also protects the employees from, say, paint or some kinds of gases or some kind of things that could be harmful to the individuals. Drones are being used for surveillance, which again, are protecting the lives of people in unsafe areas. So I think that to say that AI as a tool or as a technology has, is to be discarded or is to be avoided, I think that's not an option. It is part of it. It needs to complement human endeavors, and it needs probably proper regulation across geographies and maybe in times of, because technology could be a good slave but a bad master. So I think that's where I agree. Thank you.
I agree with you, Radha. We cannot disregard it, but I think the general message was that it needs to be mindfully applied. We do not have a whole lot of time, actually only 2 more minutes, I believe, Anil, but let's see if there are other comments or questions. May we go a few minutes over, Anil? Okay, so are there any other comments or questions? Thank you very much, Radha, for your statement in favor of AI. I definitely agree with you that there's a lot to be said for what AI is doing for us, but at the same time, do we want to become our own undoing? And that was basically, I think, the gist of our message. We have to be mindful how we apply things, because otherwise, we are becoming our own undoing, which has been predicted for this century to happen. And that would be sad. Other comments, please. Reflection.
Maybe I can just I think Orneita, your picture, was it your picture that went forth sort of from industrial revolution, all the things, the man-made revolution. And so this question really begs, and all these sessions are like that. And I think Ben's thing, he even laid out whether AI will lead to the same dehumanization or will go to, undo the humanization. So that's a very trajectory question. And I think that's what Joan is saying. I'm hearing that let it not become sort of one more, expediter or exponentializer in the same direction. Though, it is really creating a very different reality. For example, there's wealth inequality also, right? If you think of equity at that level, I mean, these days, small teams of 3, 10, 5, 20 people are worth $1 billion or trillion, multiple $1 billion in just a few days in a year, just because they have the idea, they have the access to various, capital and other resources. Like what happened with Instagram got sold for $1 billion, and WhatsApp got sold for 19 billion, and now there's so many other places too. So there is that expediting perspective from that perspective, and there's very centralizing element. There is, there are only 13 companies with unicorns in there. So in some sense, it could be continuation of the same, because mindset may not have changed. It's a profit mindset. I was listening to a talk yesterday with Amish Tripathi, and he was saying basically, Chinese, for example, or ancient civilizations have known some things cannot be allowed because they destroy society. Mm-hmm. Unbridled pursuit of profit is not the right thing to do. So I think that's probably the mindset where we may have to.
But see, Ani, chiming into what you just said, indeed, it is, that went through my mind as well, because yes, we can say unbridled pursuit of profits should be mindfully approached with or dealt with. But at the same time, you do have a lot of people who have access to means that will bring profits for them and think, you know what, after me, I don't care. People sometimes are very short-sighted in life, and all they think about is their own well-being and the well-being of their current generation and their current times, and they don't care about the future. They don't go from the mindset that what we have now is on loan from future generations. They don't see it that way. And so if you are dealing with that mindset, and unfortunately you have people who have access, who have the advantage of developing AI and the algorithms, and if the input that we get there is that negative input, we are perpetuating something that we have for the longest time been trying to get away from. And that is my biggest fear with AI. Orneita, you wanted to say something too?
So I was also,
yes, I did. Go ahead, Kathryn.
So I just want to mention that there are sessions that relate to what you brought up at the beginning, Joan, about human and non-human worlds that are at the Academy in person. So look for them, because they're not MSR sessions. They're from one, I believe. I'm not positive, but I know there are people who have been doing very thorough literature searches of relations between human and more than human worlds, and they're presenting about that. And there's at least 2 or 3 sessions on that, and they're including AI as well as relations with animals and plants in the workplace. And then also another fun thing people can do when they don't want to just be wrapped up in research is look at the role and how Star Trek evolved from the 1970s or 80s to the latest one, Picard, and the development of the robot Data, who always wanted emotions. I thought of him, Tian, when you were speaking, and how they changed the characters and how they brought in diversity as well in that series. So very interesting to look at Star Trek Next Generation and then Star Trek Picard.
And thank you, Kathryn. I'm sorry, I didn't see the hand because it blended into your background. So that's sorry for that. Orneita.
Yes, I just wanted to comment that the emphasis in regards to the case study that I shared was that there has been a lot of great technology and innovations that have occurred since that time. That research in terms of with the bioterrorism was about 2002, 2003. And so that was a long time ago. Since then, the developments in terms of a lot of what was generated has improved medical research. The level of technology that's used in one of our partners, which is Rice University and MD Anderson, they have taken those innovations and have done phenomenal work. And so the idea is that the problem is not the technology. The problem is not the innovation. Like Anil said, and Joan, you said, is that people will take a good thing and use it for their personal interests, and that can bring great harm to other people when it's all a self-focus.
And that is what I'm afraid of. And that is what we have to all be mindful about. And unfortunately, it's a pity that MSR cannot reach the whole world with the mindful message, but we can keep on trying. So thank you all for attending this session and sharing in the process of mental exercising this whole thing toward hopefully a fruitful future and not a destructive one. Anil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. My main thing is I keep forgetting to remind of this feedback form. So I would appreciate if you could fill out the feedback. Anyway, so this is again, very, very, very good discussion. These are all going to blend into one another because the theme is sort of, we're just taking 8 different takes on AI and the humanism and the sort of the MSR total domain. So this is a great continuation of that, great speakers and great perspectives. So thank you all very much. And we will see you again in about 20 minutes. Kevin is going to lead a session on, Kevin is leading a session on AI and creativity.
Creativity, yep.
Yeah, so we have no clue what creativity is, but we'll be creative in discussing it. And Kevin has a particular methodology. He said people have commended that he basically asks questions. So who knows what the questions will be and who knows what the answers will be. But I'm just kidding. I think it's just a wonderful session, and 2 people are totally from outside MSR, very creative people. So I think that'll be a lot of fun to discuss that. So thank you. I hope you'll all be able to join. Thank you. Let me stop recording.